Hello everyone, my name is Doreen Girac. I'm currently a postdoc at the Istituto de Nanotecnologia in Genova, Italy, and I'm very happy to present you today my work about the impact of environmental changes on the task of effective facial expression recognition. The recognition of facial expressions to characterize or describe human affective or emotional states is an interesting and important task to evaluate the human's behavior when interacting with a robot. So in this area, we often face a very clear experimental design and research questions to capture the effective human responses, which usually gets us a reasonable ground truth that we can use for any learning algorithm. However, labeling this data is very time-consuming, and we need a crucial amount of annotators to find the good labelist agreement. Often, the developed learning architectures are also not publicly available or sometimes insufficiently described and evaluated, which makes it hard to really judge the outcome of an HRI scenario. On the other hand, we now got a lot of pre-trained machine learning models, mostly relying on deep learning, that are trained on vast data sets, more than HRI can usually offer. But their downside is that research has shown that especially face data sets are biased regarding gender or age, so you cannot just apply off-the-shelf models on a scenario with children, for example. To adapt to specific data, meaning to retrain a deep learning model, is usually computationally expensive. And finally, most models work on discrete emotions, perhaps insufficiently describing the real affective or emotional state. In our recent study, we add the question of how well off-the-shelf machine learning models can generalize to changing environmental conditions. For example, does a model produce its classification consistently when applied on, for example, a moving robot where it faces changing lighting conditions or blur from camera adjustments? For that, we used the FaceChannel framework developed by Bauhaus and colleagues. The reference is below. And it's a so-called lightweight framework for both affective state and emotion classification. For now, we focus on the robustness of arousal valence estimation in a typical HRI task. The data that we use here in this study comes from an HRI experiment involving a cognitive task, the so-called MAPI task, where we had 14 participants in total, each performing the experiment for around 15 minutes. They sequentially solve specific requests that demands pressing of buttons and navigating with the joystick. You see some of the examples we use below, where you can also see that the participants reacted quite differently over the experiment itself. From these sequences, we estimated then the arousal valence profiles for each participant. We converted the videos into frames, which gives around 6,000 frames for each participant, and cropped the image to display mostly the face area. We then applied the image manipulations as shown in the figure there, and we made sure that still the face and the expressions can be detected. We then used the FaceChannel for the arousal valence estimation over all participants and for all conditions, and compared the outcome of the FaceChannel with the estimation from the original images. First, we inspect the deviations of the arousal valence, let's say profiles for each participant, and here we demonstrate an example sequence of 1,000 frames for the lighter and darker conditions. We can see quite a good agreement of the conditions compared to the original sequence, which is similar to the valence dimension, meaning that mostly the FaceChannel is robust against changes in the brightness levels. In contrast, we see significant deviations from the original arousal valence values when introducing Gaussian blur, noise, and motion. We see here another example where we can also see the negative impact of the Gaussian in the valence dimension. To quantify this agreement between the original FaceChannel estimation and the different image conditions, we calculated the concordance correlation coefficient, which lies in a range of -1 and 1, and is similar to the Pierce correlation. We calculated this coefficient for all 14 participants, depicted as the bars at the x-axis. The coefficient supports the observations from the sequences before, that mean that the FaceChannel is not much affected by changes in the brightness, while for the Gaussian blur, noise, and motion, you can see very small correlation values, which means that the arousal valence estimations fluctuate a lot from the original estimation. So what does it mean for the evaluation of an HRI experiment? Here we look again into an example sequence of another participant. When introducing some sort of image manipulation as to simulate, for example, more light because a robot enters a highly illuminated room, then it can happen that the arousal or the valence level in the interaction can be under or overestimated. So, for example, you have a person that's actually quite pleasantly surprised or excited by the interaction with the robot, but just because of the image manipulation and the outcome of the FaceChannel classification, you would rather say this person is neutral or calm or even a bit negatively affected. So summarize, the machine learning model can be affected by environmental changes in both directions, negative and positive, meaning that you might over or underestimate the real affective state of a human. That means that evaluating an experiment with an off-the-shelf machine learning model is prone to misinterpretation of the human behavior. For example, we might describe a person's behavior as calm or even happy, although only someone turned on some light. Thus, the claims about a whole interaction drawn from these evaluations can be eventually distorted. However, we acknowledge that our study is very limited as we only consider 14 participants from a specific HRI task, and clearly we need more investigations into different models, for example, OpenFace or PyFeed, evaluated on more HRI scenarios. Also, it would be interesting to analyze the emotion classification results from different models and study how much different models deviate in their classification responses. Also, we can think of more image manipulations, including more natural environmental conditions and including some movements of the humans. In the meantime, it is advisable that more data augmentation is used when using HRI data collections to obtain better generalization and to use more in-the-wild data. Popular open source projects like PyTorch, for example, allow easy integration of these image manipulation steps on the fly when training your model. Also, it is worth to check out models that allow easy retraining when you have a very specific data set, where you only retrain the last layer of a deep neural network, as shown in a recent publication presented at ACII conference, and the reference is below. Finally, I'm particularly interested to analyze affective states or emotional behavior with other modalities like verbal communication or the more unconscious hand-over-face gestures to check whether the classification results are consistent or not with other emotion expressions. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and thanks a lot to my collaborators Pablo Bajos, Alexandra Schutti, and Francesco Rea. If you have questions or want to discuss, please drop me an email. Have a very nice day. Ciao.